All right, so we're going to get started. My name is Mary Beth Gassman, and I am a professor at Rutgers University, and I also am the executive director of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Institute for Leadership, Equity, and Justice and the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions. And we are sponsoring this event today. We're really, really excited to sponsor it. It's called The Connected College. And this is really a book talk about a new book that Elliot has out. I want to tell you just a little bit about Elliot. I've known Elliot for quite a while now, and he is an incredibly dynamic person. Elliot Felix, he is a student success author and speaker and consultant to more than 100 colleges and universities. And he uses his background in design, which I love, to create better connected colleges and universities by improving the spaces students learn and live in, and helps, also with support services that they rely on and technology that students use. So over the past 20 years, he's been a speaker at South by Southwest Education, or EDU, taught courses on innovation, and he's worked with over 100 universities, including Carnegie Mellon, MIT, North Carolina State, NYU, University of Virginia, lots and lots of places. So he is, I want to also was going to say that Brightspot, which is a higher education strategy consulting company, he founded in 2011, which is how I met him. And it was acquired by Burrow Happold in 2020, where he now leads the higher education advisory practice. So with his work and that of his colleagues, he's worked to improve the experience of more than 1 million students, which I love that. And I love that you think about it too. So this is going to be kind of a little bit of a different approach. We're going to have lots of interaction and lots of time for you to be asking questions. So as you're hearing things from Elliot, I want you to think about questions and you can put them in the Q&A. The chat we use to communicate with you, but you can put your questions in the Q&A, and we're going to answer questions throughout the presentation. The other thing is that there is a discount code for the book. And at some point, you may get a link in the chat for a poll that Elliot's going to ask you to take. So, Elliot, take it away. I'm really excited about this. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks, Mary Beth, and thanks to Rutgers and thanks to the Institute. Really excited to be here and really excited to talk about how we can create better connected colleges and universities and the role that you all can play in that. And let's get started. As we get started, Mary Beth did a great job of introducing me, and I'll just say that I've had the honor, the pleasure, the privilege of working with more than 100 colleges and universities, helping them improve their spaces, their support services, their technology systems, and the strategy that drives all that. Everyone is a little bit different, but student success is in everyone's mission. And in working with all these folks, I've learned that smart, well-meaning, collaborative folks run into barriers. They encounter challenges. They adapt to changes as they try and help students succeed. And what I've learned and how to get over those barriers or around them or through them and how to react to those changes and those challenges, I've put into the Connected College, really to give folks an encouraging, evidence-based playbook for breaking down silos so that students succeed. And I'm going to share some of the insights from that, which is drawn from my work with all these different institutions, as well as my own research and my interviews with dozens of higher ed innovators that are profiled in the book, each of which has a kind of a chapter that aligns to a function of a college or university: admissions, athletics, academics, student affairs, technology, career, library, board governance, and starts with a profile of some of these innovators that I've learned so much with, and I'm excited to share with all of you. And given that, I kind of wanted to start with a story of what we're trying to avoid. And it's a story of silos that unfortunately I think is going to sound a little familiar to all of you. A while ago, I was consulting with a university, and the idea was to create a student success hub that would bring together all the different functions organizationally in the same space using the same technology so they could better support students. So we had the kickoff meeting, and around the table, we had the library, we had IT, we had the math center, we had the tutoring center, we had the writing center, we had the writing lab. And I don't know if you caught that they have a writing center and a writing lab. I don't know if you're confused by that, but I was back then. And I asked them, what's the difference between the two? And it turned out there was very little difference. They were just sitting in organizational silos. They were both peer-to-peer models for supporting students with their writing, looking at the structure, the tone, the flow, so that students could better communicate. One sat in the English department, one sat in the student success function, and they for whatever reason, history, structure, tradition, culture, systems, they weren't quite working together. And what we want is actually a holistic approach where folks are working together. I think at connected colleges, you're breaking down those silos so that students succeed, and you're thinking about your programs, you're aligning it to your purpose and your mission, you're creating the policies and the processes that support those programs, whether it's an orientation program, a mentoring program, a degree program, or certificate program. Then you have the right physical places and digital platforms to create the kinds of experiences that we all want for our students and our faculty and our staff and our alumni and our community members. So we're bringing together the people and the partners. We're getting the patronage, the support to make it happen, and we're delivering. We're on the performance. We're delivering on that purpose. So at better connected colleges and universities, there are five key connections that you see. And it really starts with belonging to a community, feeling that sense that you're part of a community, that you're part of something bigger, and that you're in it together. And belonging, lots of great folks have written about this and thought about this. I think we all know, we all know, but we also owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Terrell Strayhorn for thinking about this and really leading the charge so that students feel that sense of belonging as part of something bigger to a community, that they matter, that they're cared for. And that's really foundational. The second kind of connection we're all trying to create is connecting students to the support they need to succeed. And that could be a writing center, it could be a tutoring center, it could be a math lab, it could be the library, could be career development, could be advising. But so often colleges and universities have so many great support services and programs that students may not know about. They may not be able to get to because they're, stuffed in a basement or at the edge of a campus or only open 9 to 5. And so even though help is there, support is there, people are there, they're not, they may not be connected with it, they may not be comfortable using it. So we want to make that connection as well. The third key connection is connecting coursework to careers and really bridging this divide between getting an education and getting a job. And it doesn't mean everything is vocational. There's room for the liberal arts. There's room for creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, communication. But we really want students to feel like there's some sense of progress, like they're exploring and they're making progress toward a career or careers along a path, and they're meeting mentors, they're meeting role models along the way, because it's when you meet a market researcher that your stats class comes alive. To make that happen, to feel a sense of belonging, to connect students to support, to connect courses to careers, everyone needs to work better together and collaborate to make that happen. That's breaking down the silos, that's rethinking the structures, that's redesigning the processes, rethinking the policies. And so that internal collaboration is really what makes it happen. And the other thing that makes it happen is external partnerships, right? So not just the collaboration within the institution, but externally to community groups, municipalities, corporate partners on things like experiential learning programs. So students are doing real world projects in their classes. They're building skills, they're building relationships, they're making an impact, they're getting projects in their portfolio that helps them progress on that career path and get that job. And it may be about research as well. That's a high impact practice in its own right. So these five connections are really key. And when you put them together, they allow institutions to maybe challenge tradition and conventional wisdom and the way we've always done things, not throwing it all out, but changing the right things at the right time so that we're going from maybe what hasn't worked so well for students to succeed to better connected colleges and universities. So we want to go from a kind of a stay in your lane mentality to actually busting silos and working together. We want to go from seeing tradition as our strength to seeing agility as a strength just as much. We want to go from what has been sort of the playbook for meeting new needs, which is as things change, as new needs arise, you're responding to changes in technology and demographics. There's a kind of a tried and true way of doing that, which is to add people and programs and spaces. But I think now is the time really to think about how we coordinate, how we collaborate, how we co-locate, how we consolidate, because more isn't always better. Sometimes less is better. Sometimes less is more. Instead of seeing corporate partners as something that are going to uh, torpedo the university and the corporatization as our downfall, we don't have to see markets and missions as in conflict. We can actually partner with industry on experiential learning, on research. Instead of seeing demographics as destiny, we can see differentiation as destiny. We can have a strategy that focuses us to do something that only we can do. And instead of feeling like we have to create this broad appeal because of our access mission, you can still increase access and success while you're building niche communities. So students find their place, they find their people, they find their program, they find their purpose. And, instead of strategy being all things to all people and everyone getting spread thin and feeling like you have to do more with less, you can actually have strategy that focuses you so you do less with more, and you can make bold decisions instead of waiting for consensus to take action, which doesn't mean people aren't consulted, but it means you can move swiftly uh, so that students succeed. So with that, I want to then think about how we can apply these ideas, and I can share some stories and some stats along the way to help you create better connected colleges and universities. And in order to do that, we're going to go through this structure. As Mary Beth mentioned, we're going to pause for questions along the way. So I'm going to talk about three big barriers I see to creating more connected colleges and universities: strategy, space, and structure. Sometimes the strategy gets in the way, sometimes it's the space, sometimes it's the structure. So I'll tell three stories. We'll take questions along the way, give you a chance to apply this to your institution, to your work, so you can make an impact, so you can help students succeed. And so, in order to do that, I think it's really useful to understand what you see are the biggest barriers. So, in the poll, and you'll get a link in the chat, or you can just type it in. You see there in the upper left corner, pollev.com/brightspot, or you can go to the QR code. I'm interested in your top three barriers to enabling student success. So I'll give you a second to fill out the poll. All right, so we've got one person choosing traditional organizational cultures. We've got disparate or distributed teams. We've got outdated policies. We've got not sharing data effectively. We've got outdated policies and processes looking, off to an early lead here, and siloed organizational structures. No, siloed organization. I feel like I'm calling the Kentucky Derby here, but so it seems like silos is perhaps the biggest issue. Policies and procedures second, and traditional organizational cultures third, um, which is really interesting. So as I tell these stories and think about some strategies and tactics you can use to enable student success, be thinking about these barriers, be thinking about questions, um, and we'll dive into how we might address these, because as we talk about strategy and space and structure, I'll try and hit on these in terms of the silos, in terms of the policies, in terms of the data, in terms of the culture. So the first barrier we often encounter is strategy. And I like to say that every institution has a strategic plan, but not every institution has a strategy. Not every institution has a true strategy that guides them, where they're making choices about where to play and how to win, which is what former business school dean and strategy guru Roger Martin frames it in that way. And so what happens a lot is you get five goals, the fifth of which is organizational excellence. And strategy and strategic planning are understood as, how can we create a big enough tent that everything we do fits under it, as opposed to making hard choices about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, so that you can make a unique contribution, so that you can deliver on your mission, so that you can make an impact. And I think a key part of everybody's strategy needs to be, and done in their own way, experiential learning, because that is really one of these rare chances in higher ed where we can make 1 + 1 = 11, which I know that math doesn't quite work out, but wouldn't it be great if we could make it work out, and we could scale up our impact in service of student success? And when students are working on experiential learning projects, whether it's an internship or a real world class project or a co-op, it really pays off. 80% of students are looking for experiential learning, but only about 30% of faculty are offering these kinds of projects. We know when students work on these projects, they're more engaged after graduation, which kind of makes sense, because it gives you a chance to prototype your own future. It gives you a chance to test out who you want to be, and how you want to be in the world, and how you want to make impact. And it allows you to bridge coursework and careers, which only about a quarter of students, 24%, take a career development course. And one of my favorite projects that really dug into this idea of experiential learning was working with the University of Rochester. They noticed that there was a lot of student demand to make an impact culturally, in the community, economically, socially. And a lot of these kinds of projects, if you want to do a volunteer project, or you want to start a podcast, or you want to do a performance, um, their natural home isn't the entrepreneurship center in the business school, because you don't need to start a company to deliver that project. What you need is a place where you can come together, get inspired, build skills, test things out, find your team, meet with a mentor. And so we created the iZone within the neutral turf of the library to do just that, so that students could learn about, develop, deliver, share, showcase their projects to make economic, cultural, and social impact. And it's had a huge impact in, I think, 8 years of existence. They've touched more than 300,000 folks, and really, I think, made an impact not only in the lives of students as they're building relationships, working with a company, doing a civic engagement project, but also on the communities and the companies they're working with. And I think you really can enable experiential learning at your institution. If you're already doing it, it's about uh, going from great to awesome, right? And doing it not in isolated pockets that are built on one-to-one relationships. A faculty member happens to know a company in the community, but really thinking about how you scale it up so it's not just something you do, it's part of who you are. And that means supporting pedagogical shifts. My shorthand for this is like from papers to projects, where students are working on projects in teams that build skills and relationships, um, and then working with them to build those skills through training, through consultation, through mentoring, through practice. And then you're getting the flywheel turning by bringing groups together so that they can talk about what they're creating, what they learned, where they failed, where they succeeded. And as that flywheel is turning, it generates more interest. Maybe I'll join that team the next time. Maybe this would be a mentor I could meet with, and, and that success scales. So now I'd love to pause for questions and hear what you all have put in the Q&A about strategy, and think about the barriers you might encounter or uncover, not uncover, as you're trying to apply these ideas, as you're trying to implement experiential learning, as you're trying to not get spread thin, doing more with less, but actually get focused so that you can do less with more.
All right, thank you, Elliot. We have a couple of questions. One of them is, can you talk about how you created the iZone in the library? Like how does that work? What's the practical nature of that? And I was also really curious about that because people do really act out in their silos and don't necessarily want to come together even on campuses sometimes, because especially if you're on a like a responsibility centered budgeting campus, or so how does it work in practical terms?
Yeah, so I think the big reason that the library stepped up for this project was, they had a track record for listening to students and really proactively thinking about how they could help students make an impact in their lives and in the community. And they saw the value of being that neutral turf because, if you have a maker space or a rapid prototyping lab in the engineering school, not every student is going to A, know about it, B, feel comfortable, C, is their ID even going to swipe into that space? Do they even have actual access? Same thing for an entrepreneurship center in the business school. It might be for everyone uh, in a formal sense, but in an informal sense, it may not come across that way. So we use the library as neutral turf, and we really started with stakeholder engagement, in an inclusive process to talk to students and faculty and staff about the kinds of projects, the sort of impact, the kind of the activities. We also, and that was kind of the internal look, we coupled that with a kind of an environmental scan or an external look at the landscape, what's already out there, because we didn't want to just replicate the silos, right? We wanted to find the white space where there's real opportunity. And so it turned out that there were lots of places that were focused on, if you want to start a company, and there were lots of, incubators and places where you could grow that. But the idea of like a pre-incubator, a hub for experiential learning projects, was this kind of gap in the market or in the offerings. So then we took all the kind of the ideas and the activities and the projects input, and then where there was this gap that we could bridge, we put those together and forecasted the kinds of spaces that would be needed to support those projects. And then we did a lot of prototyping. So before the space even existed, Rochester started doing programming, events, workshops. Who's turning up? Why are they turning up? Are they coming individually? Are they coming as teams? You're learning from that, and then you're folding all that into the design. And the other thing we did is we thought about the operating model in parallel to the space model. So we thought about how are you going to staff this? And at a time of limited resources, what was really a great opportunity was creating student fellows who are coaching teams, leading workshops, offering that peer-to-peer support that are complemented by full-time staff running the center and mentors and volunteers and folks in the community. So that's kind of how we put it all together.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got lots of questions. Hope you're ready. Um,
Yeah,
Here's one I really love. Can you discuss ways that you've collected student voices to ensure that the strategy is meeting the needs?
I love that question. And part of the reason I love it is I know it's so important and so sorely needed. Um, we do a national student survey to kind of take the pulse of students on their experience on a regular basis. And one of the scores that's consistently among the lowest, especially as you think about culture and community, is the idea of having a voice. And so you really need to be intentional about how you engage students broadly and deeply. And the depth usually comes from working with and within existing governance structures, like working with student leaders, reaching out not just to student government, but leaders of different student organizations. Maybe it is the entrepreneurship club, maybe it is the social impact group, maybe it is the environmental group. Whoever could be, you know, could be at the table, and that gives you the depth, but you also need the breadth. And so you get that through things like surveys, through town hall meetings. One of my favorites are something called an intercept interview, where you go out across the campus or online and you ask people questions. Maybe you're waiting at the bus stop, maybe you're waiting outside the union. You ask them to dot vote, what are the biggest, interesting projects they want to work on? What do they see as the barriers? What kinds of spaces would help them? What kinds of services and programs would help them? And so you put all that together, the quantitative, the qualitative, the broad, the deep, um, and then you bring the student voice to the table. And I think it's so critical. One example I'll offer, this is actually another library example, but we had talked to students, and one of the ideas that they were really passionate about was having a kind of a satellite mental health support function in the library. And then we had the meeting with the steering committee of senior administrators, many of whom were thinking about, the library they went to school in, not the next generation library, but one or two ago. And they were like, that doesn't belong in the library. And so just being able to say, hey, this was actually the second from the top in terms of what students asked for among a list of about 70 things. That's what helped us advocate for and keep it in the project. So I think the student voice is really critical. And maybe we take one more question and then we move on to our next act.
Yeah, and we'll get back to many of these questions at the end as well. I just want to say I love the idea of mental health services in the library. That's such a great idea,
Yeah, it's
especially
open
because
late.
yeah, and you're
People are on a
stressing
deadline.
out too. You're stressing out
That's
from
yeah,
studying, So yeah,
that's where people are working toward a deadline on a project late at night, stressed out. It's yeah. I mean, if
it's
you want to
great.
meet people where they are, a lot of the time they're in the library.
Yeah, I love that. I love that too. So, okay, here's one can I ask you one more before we head to space? Is that okay?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
please.
How did you get buy-in from executive leadership to implement experiential learning at the institution where you gave the example?
So I think the buy-in part wasn't actually that hard because we had the student voice and we had the environmental scan showing there was a gap in support. Um, and we have there's so much great impact data on these kinds of projects from all the longstanding research about high impact practices and things like the Gallup Purdue Index, which is one of my favorite studies of all time, um, where a huge data set, they looked at what do students do in college, and then how engaged are they in the workforce afterwards. And things like working on a semester-long project or a capstone project or having a mentor or doing an internship really jump off the page. And so I think between the national data, the local student voice, and the local kind of gap analysis of where there was a lack of support, whether it's services or space or staffing, those all came together, I think, and made a pretty compelling case. And incidentally, as you think about case making, doing pilots and prototypes like Rochester did, I think is so helpful. And this was deliberately part of the strategy is start doing the programming before you even have the space, because then you can go to donors and instead of saying something that's pretty close to, hey, we have this unproven idea and we'd love your money, you can say, look at the great stuff we're doing. Imagine how we could scale it up with your support.
All right. Thank you. And as I said, we will get to all these other questions too. We'll get to as many as possible. All right, Elliot, take us to the
Yeah,
next.
we're only halfway, so
Yeah.
we've got plenty of opportunities. So um, space is also a barrier. You know, a lot of times universities grow organically, and new needs emerge, new centers, new departments, new institutes, new functions, um, and they end up distributed or disparate, or something grows and you don't have quite enough space to accommodate over here, so you have a little part over here, and then all of a sudden you're very dispersed, you're very disparate, you're very diffused. Sometimes it is about the structure, which is what we're going to talk about next, and kind of a siloed structure often begets separate spaces. But space can be a real barrier to collaboration when you're talking about working together so that students succeed, because it can make things more complicated, it can make things more complex, it can make things more costly, and it can really hinder the collaboration. And there's really good research that shows the value of co-location and collaboration and consolidation. One of my favorites is a study that Rand did with a community college system looking at tens of thousands of students, and they found that having all your core student support services together in a one-stop shop, which incidentally, Rutgers has a great new uh, example of that, a great new one-stop, is associated with a 3 percentage point bump in retention. We also know, we've been talking about the value of libraries as common ground and neutral turf and meeting students where they are. Um, my company, Bureau Happold, did a study where we got anonymized sensor data from 38 universities of 3 years of usage patterns, looking at how many people were in what space. And libraries that have student success functions in them have 25% higher peak utilization, because not only are students coming for the study space and the books, they're coming for the services. And if you can get writing help and tutoring help and communications help and data viz help, and advising even, or careers in that place, it obviously drives usage. And when you bring people together so that they have that sense of community, whether it's in an identity space, whether it's using a student support function in a student success center, that leads to belonging. And students who feel that sense of belonging are 41% more likely to retain from first to second year. So, of course, there are some times when distributed, spread out is better. You get better coverage, you get better reach, you get points of distinction, whatever it may be. There are lots of good reasons, but there's also lots of good reasons to bring folks together so that when they're co-located, they can collaborate, they can cooperate, they can coordinate much more easily, much more fluidly. And that was very much the case at the University of Virginia, where we worked on a project to redesign their advising program, especially pre-major advising, and space was a key part of that. They found, like a lot of universities, um, room for improvement, and not, it's not like it was tanking. It was more like, how do we go from great to awesome? For pre-major advising, based on the CERU survey, Student Experience at a Research University. And they asked us, can we work together to figure out what's behind this? So we interviewed students, we shadowed students, we did a more detailed follow-up survey, we talked to lots of staff and faculty, and uncovered that a key pain point, a key part of the problem was, good news is you've got all these different services. You can learn about study abroad over here. You can talk to people in your major over here. You can talk to people from the Career Center over here. You can talk to your advisor over here. And it was great that they had all these things, but they were in all different places. And so, in addition to rethinking this structurally, we rethought it spatially, and we created a total advising center, which was centrally located. And it brought together a couple dozen different support services in a flexible way, because everybody doesn't have to be dedicated, have their own dedicated space. They can come for a workshop, they can come and do office hours, right? And so then you can have shared spaces, shared consult rooms, shared offices, shared workshop space for all these different kinds of programs, whether it's, building your LinkedIn profile, studying abroad, getting financial support, getting financial aid advice. And so we brought all these folks together in these shared spaces. And the idea was, if you do it in a flexible way, not only can you accommodate more services visiting and working together and doing a program, for instance, how does study abroad feed into career development and placement? But through those shared programs and sharing space, you can get better outcomes. And we actually we sort of flipped the script on satisfaction, where we had 30%, I think, dissatisfaction reduced to 15, and then that 15 went into the satisfied bucket. And a way fewer people very dissatisfied, way more people very satisfied. So, and we reach students that we otherwise wouldn't. And I think that the best part of this shared space model, this also happens to be in a library, was a way to meet students where they are and to blend study and support, so that you're normalizing getting help. You're maybe destigmatizing the idea that I need writing help, I need tutoring, I don't know where the Career Center is, whatever it might be. And so at one table, you might have two students working together on a project, and another, you might have a student talking to their peer mentor. At 1 o'clock in the consult room, you're meeting with a financial aid counselor. At 2 o'clock, that room is getting used for a consultation on how to do a civic engagement project. And so it brought all those folks together, co-located, to enable collaboration, coordination, cooperation. And I think, as you're trying to think about how to better support students and the role that space can play in that, really think about how you can co-locate services to increase awareness and access. Think about ways to blend study and support to normalize getting help. And it doesn't have to be in a library. It can be in the lobby of the common space of a building, but that's a way to meet students where they are. And as you're thinking about faculty and staff who are supporting students, think about how you're building a community of practice, right? So it isn't just throwing related functions together, but it's getting some benefit from being together by building that kind of community where, hey, we can do this workshop together, or we can do joint office hours, we can do joint programming, I can cover your shift, and you can work together as a community, within a community, building community. So now you're veterans at this, but we've reached discussion period 2, where we can talk about how you can use space as part of your toolkit for enabling student success in better connected colleges and universities.
Okay, so here's a question. This came up in the last one, but I think it would really make a difference here too. How important is it to have a change agent as a kind of strategy execution lead in either one of these cases? Because it seems like you might need
Yeah,
somebody who's got a lot of energy and motivation.
yeah, you probably need more than one, as a matter of fact, but it's really critical. And I'll tell you one book, and one approach that has really shaped, um, so many of the consulting projects that I've done, and so much of the success that I've been able to have is a book from the 50s called The Diffusion of Innovations by Everett Rogers, who was a social scientist. And if you've ever heard the phrase early adopter, he was the one who coined that. And what Rogers was studying, funny enough, he was studying the diffusion or the adoption of a new idea around, corn seed among farmers, I think in Iowa, but don't quote me on the Iowa part. And it turned out that that was a really good way to think about how ideas spread and get it adopted, writ large. And what he figured out is that there are different people along this adoption curve that adopt new ideas for different reasons. And you start off with innovators that come up with the ideas, and then you have early adopters. And the early adopters, they're influenced by, the media, and they're looking at the latest trends, and they want to be seen as doing something new. And then you have the early majority. And the early majority, they're not influenced so much by the media as their peers. So they look to the early adopters and they say, oh, okay, Mary Beth's doing that thing. Now that's probably safe for me to do it. And then, um, you have the late majority, and they kind of jump on the bandwagon when it's perceived that, okay, this is the way the wind is blowing, this is what everybody's doing, I might as well get on board. And then you have the laggards that are, clutching their rotary phones and basically only change if they have to. And so the reason those change agents or those champions or ambassadors or whatever you want to call them are so important is because that's part of your scaling strategy, right? The people who are going to convince, others to get on board, are, in many cases are their peers. It's the same thing for faculty embracing active and experiential learning, right? Uh, they can hear lots of presentations and see lots of data, but it's a conversation with a peer about some new technique or strategy they're using that's really going to move the needle. So I think identifying, thinking about the change process as you're implementing any idea, whether it's about a space or a staffing or system or all of them, is so critical because those are the people that kind of convince, that make it a reality, bring others along. And you also give them a place and a way to roll up their sleeves and make an impact and make a difference and bring their skills, their talents, their smarts to the table.
Thank you. Here's another question. How do you provide service to underrepresented students when there are budget cuts and less staff are serving?
Well, I think um, in a time when, resources are diminishing or uncertain at the very least, I kind of think about, we're sort of in the era of flat as the new up. Like if you can keep things stable, you're doing great. Um, I think that's where strategy is even more important because it helps you prioritize. And I think, um, if you think about like all the success that, places like Georgia State and Ivy Tech have had, it's having the strategy that's focused on student success, and then it's having the data to figure out where to focus, right? To figure out how to do the outreach, to do the predictive analytics, to understand, um, where to focus your efforts, and to help you prioritize. So I would say it starts with strategy that helps you focus, but then you have to follow it up through the implementation by really using data to figure out, how you can be most helpful, Um, and I think if you can break down some silos and you can combine some different functions, consolidate some different functions, so you're not more spread thin, or so you're not using your resources inefficiently or ineffectively. That's certainly part of the solution as well.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to the next section, but there are some really good questions that have come in, and we will get to those once we are done with structure. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, and I can do shorter answers too. I've been doing a little bit of, you're asking what time it is, and I'm telling you how watches are made, but I can be a little crisper in my answers as well. So
All
the
good,
the
all
third
good.
the third barrier that folks often encounter as they're trying to increase student success and create better connected colleges and universities is structure, because that is, and you all noted this in the poll, the silos as the biggest barrier. And I think a lot of people are not satisfied with their structure. Only 42%, I think, of faculty and staff think their structure is working. At the same time, there's so much change. There's so many change initiatives, and they're not all working. 82% of people, across sectors, not just within higher ed, have experienced a reorg, and half of those have failed. On the other hand, when you are really thinking about change as a process, right, you're understanding people, their motivations, the incentives, their ability, their opportunity to change, you're assessing change readiness, and then you're managing the change through training, development, communication. ProSci has found that when you're actually doing that, you're 7 times more likely to succeed. So we know that there's a need um, to look at our structures. We know often the way we're meeting that need isn't working, and we know if we do it right, it really will, and then some. And this was what we encountered um, at Miami University, where, like a lot of organizations, it had grown organically. You have your traditional functions, and you bolt new ones on the side without actually reconsidering or integrating. And they didn't want to do that. And they also, like a lot of places, you have your formal organizational structure, but then oftentimes there's actually a different way that work gets done. And it might be that you have your departments, and then you got all your committees, right? And it turns out like people actually get the work done in the committees and the task forces. And at a certain point, you're asking yourself, why aren't our committees our departments? Like, why do we have these two? Why do we have a way that we're organized and a way that we work? And so we really tried to bring those together. So we created a new service model that looked at the services they offered and defined them with, back to the student voice and the faculty voice, with students, faculty, and staff, finding the right language, scoping the right roles, clearly defining things. And so we settled on these 6 service areas: create and innovate, advise and instruct, access and borrow, steward and sustain, share and showcase, tools and technology, with a kind of kicker in terms of the administrative services. And then those rolled up to 3 associate deans and the overall dean. And this worked really great for them, because instead of having how you're organized and how you work, they were organized based on what they offered and how they worked. And it really made things a lot easier for folks. And actually, the case study got written up in Leading Change, and it was quite successful. And I think part of what made it successful, which is a tip I offer people all the time as they're trying to think about how to get things done or even how to get things started, is we were really clear in the process to not uh, aim people at perfect. Instead, we said what we're going for is something that's safe to try. This is a reversible decision. It's a modifiable decision. Let's get to the point where we think something is good enough to try, and then let's try it and adjust. But oftentimes, people are waiting for the perfect solution. They're waiting for complete consensus, and you're never going to get there. In fact, no successful product or project ever works that way, where you wait for perfection to launch. You actually have to put something out, and then people have to start using it, doing it, living it, breathing it, and then you modify it. And each modification probably makes it a little bit better and gets people better engaged, because it's not just about showing people the data. It's about engaging them in the process. In my experience, no matter how much data you show someone, they're not going to want to be part of a future they didn't have a hand in creating. And so, as you're thinking about rethinking your staffing and your structure, I think you really have to be smart about identifying and organizing your offerings, services, academic programs, events, whatever it might be, and then relating what you offer to how you're organized. I think you also have to let go of that's the way we've always done it. In fact, I wrote an op-ed years ago about what are the fallacies that are holding us back, um, and aim for good enough to try or safe to try rather than perfect. And we have
Great.
6 minutes or so left for our final set of questions, and I'm
Yeah.
delighted to dive in.
All right, lots of things. So, here's one. We are challenged with getting our students to pre-register for the upcoming semester, which has an impact on enrollment numbers. We use traditional means of communicating with students, email, setting up in the cafe, but what other means would you recommend for an under-resourced institution?
Well, I think it already sounds like you're doing some proactive outreach, which I think is great. Um, my sense is you might need a different communication channel, uh, like text, but you might also need some kind of scaling structure, right, where you have student ambassadors uh, who can kind of spread the word. And what you want is that thing to go viral. You might also look at how you're designing the emails, because every student gets too many emails that they don't open. And if you design an email to look like an Instagram post, you get a lot better results. And in fact, there's some case studies of this that I've written about. So I would look at the channels, the design of the email, and then how you can go viral with students talking to students.
Oh, I love that answer because I think sometimes universities send out these really, really long emails, and I am a firm believer in emails should be short. So,
Yes.
yeah, great answer. Okay, let's see. I think we might have time for a couple more questions. Here's one. I'm curious what this would look like for students who would benefit from receiving earlier experiential learning in a medical field, for example, like nursing. Universities are already vying for clinical placements. I recommend that students do internships, shadowing over the summer, but sometimes that isn't enough. What might you suggest?
Well, I think the paradigm uh, is really shifting and needs to shift even faster to blend coursework and careers. And so I think one solution could be a career development course. So instead of treating that as like something that students do in spare time that they don't have, something extra, do a career development course that incorporates the shadowing, the internships, the reflection, the experiences, so they're getting credit and it's not this extra thing. It's embedded. One of my favorite examples of this, Gutman Community College at CUNY has this course called the Ethnographies of Work, where you go out, shadow people, and you write about the culture of the place you shadowed. And in the process, you learn what it is to be a professor, an accountant, or everything in between. So I would make it a course and integrate it so it's not something extra.
I like that too. I love that. I love practical knowledge and learning like that. Okay, here's another one. How have you seen faculty being drawn together as a collaborative effort? And I was also really interested in that because faculty are really in silos typically. So how do you make it happen, or how have you seen it happen?
Well, I think faculty love to talk about their own work. And I think, as we all do, and I think if you can create forums or fora, I guess if you want to get technical, where faculty can come together and share and showcase what they're working on, um, that can breed collaborations across disciplines, across departments. between academic affairs and student affairs. So I would start with somehow tapping into what people are passionate about, and then build from there.
All right. Okay. I think I might have time for this last question. We're collaborating with Mentor Collective to offer a peer-to-peer mentoring program as a strategy to encourage student success, sense of belonging, and academic self-seeking behavior. The challenge is getting the buy-in from faculty. Many see it as my project program. What recommendations do you have for gaining faculty buy-in to scale up the program and encourage more involvement?
Well, I would say faculty, as I mentioned earlier, like faculty hearing from each other. So do a pilot, have a panel, have faculty talk about what a great experience was, how working with the central program rather than an organic one-off ad hoc thing saved them a bunch of time, share the data on the results, demonstrate how that allows for greater impact. I think those are all good. Those are all good strategies. And I actually have an episode coming out soon with Mentor Collective talking about all the great stuff they're doing on the Connected College podcast. So I love that. The other thing I would say is embed it within another process. So I think I think it's University of Michigan Dearborn. You register for classes and you register for a mentor at the same time. So again, consolidate, combine, cooperate, coordinate. Better for everybody, better results.
Great. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Elliot. This was really, really terrific. And I also want to say thank you to the audience for the great interaction and questions. They were terrific. And we put a discount code in the chat for Elliot's new book. And Elliot, we also put your email in there because we thought
That's great too.
people might have some questions. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our team at the Proctor Institute. And we really appreciated you spending time with us today. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the questions and appreciate all the work you're doing at the Institute.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.